Okay. Thank you for coming in. And Moya, thank you for inviting me to talk about Earthships, because I am more than willing to talk about Earthships any day of the week. And I will try to keep this as concise as possible and try not to get off topic too much. Again, my name is Cathy Krueger, and I live here in Nebraska. I'm from Nebraska, and I have been obsessed with Earthships for decades. Back in the late 80s, I heard a little 3-minute blurb on some show about Earthships, and I got kind of in the middle of it. I didn't even get into it enough to know what they were called. I just saw kind of what was going on, and I loved the idea, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was probably at least a couple years later until I saw another thing about Earthships and figured out, oh, those were the houses that I had seen in the previous small story. And then I bought the books, and I went to Argentina to learn how to build one. It was the first time the academy classes had been offered internationally. Always before, they had been offered just in Taos, New Mexico, and I'd never been to Argentina. So I decided to go to Argentina and learn how to build one. And we built a simple survival Earthship. There were 70 of us volunteering to do that, and we built it in 28 days. So it was quite an accomplishment, and with 70 people, it just went up so quickly. And then in April of 2017, I started my own Earthship, and I moved in about a year. Sadly, a couple of years ago, I had an electrical fire. I had a power strip that failed, and it was completely destroyed. So now I'm in the process of trying to decide, am I going to build again? Am I not going to build again? But anyway, that's kind of a background of me and my Earthship love. So let's get going on what Earthships actually are. They're developed by an architect named Michael Reynolds. He is in his 80s now, and he is he's an old hippie, basically. He graduated from architecture school in 1969, and he developed what he called radically sustainable housing. He said that his father was kind of a hoarder of all various kinds of discarded materials, and he kind of carried on that that love of discarded items and thought there had to be a way to use all of this garbage to do something productive. And his mode of using that was in architecture. And he experimented with a variety of concepts, from using cans, bottles. He had one house that he had a beer bottling company just basically beer cans of water, and he wanted the water to be the thermal mass in the house. When they were delivered, however, they were bottled incorrectly. He wanted basically a sealed container with no pop top, but they had accidentally included the pop top. So he took them, but he said that house is still standing, but every once in a while you hear this little psh, and then you'll see a wet spot on the wall, but the house is still standing and it's still working. It's just kind of funny when you have a wet spot on the wall from that. The first experimental house that he built that really resembled what an Earthship is today was built in 1979. And then they've continued to progress since then. Mike did purchase 600 plus acres just outside of Taos, New Mexico, and 350 acres of that is designed to never be built on. It's designed as a green belt, and he's named this community the Greater World Community. And it's plotted, oh, I didn't put this on here. I think it's plotted for 160 homes, if my memory serves me correctly. And that's not all of those are built onto yet. They vary from a ½ acre to, I believe, 2.5 acres. He also within that 600 plus acres, he has an experimental building area, which he finally got passed through the New Mexico state government, to allow him to do anything he wants in that small area. He doesn't have to necessarily meet the standard building codes, because he can experiment within that area. And then there's also the Earthship Visitor Center, which, if you're ever in Taos, I would definitely go to the Earthship Visitor Center. They have videos there. They also do tours There's several models of Earthships there, and how they've progressed. The original ones look a little bit more out there. Their designs have some more spires, and the more recent ones are, I would say, more traditionally looking homes, but they all are amazing to go tour. There are 6 design principles for Earthships. The first one is shelter, providing heating and cooling, garbage management, energy, clean water, sewage treatment, and food. And we're going to go into each one of those in a little bit more detail. The picture on this is the Earthship, the simple survival Earthship that I helped build in Ushuaia, Argentina, just so you get an idea of what we built in 28 days. The first principle is shelter with passive heating. And this diagram shows how in the winter, the sun comes into the home at a lower angle, providing the sunlight to heat up the home. And that is the whole principle of passive solar. Whereas in the summer, the sun is higher in the sky. And so the sun doesn't really hit inside the home to warm it up. In my Earthship, in the summer, the sun did not come in any farther than my planting bed, which was 4 foot wide inside the greenhouse portion of my home. And then the cooling is provided in an Earthship via the cooling tubes. And you can see where there's this tube coming in through the back of the home. They need to be buried underground for at least 20 feet so that the coolness of the ground can have enough time to cool the air before it enters the home. So it enters the home cooled, chilled by the Earth's own temperature. And then as it rises and goes up and out the skylight in the greenhouse, the hot air rises and goes out. So in the summer, when it's really hot, heat rises. You open up the skylight on the top and the heat rises out, and that air has to be displaced by pulling more air in. So it's natural convection. There are no fans or mechanical devices needed at all for cooling. And then the garbage management is the second principle. In garbage management, it's basically upcycling and recycling as many materials as possible. Cans are used to build walls, to fill up spaces so that less plastering is needed. The tires, the picture on the right is actually my home when I was building it. And you can see the tires that we had lined up. Each row is set back 1.5 inches so that the pressure of the ground pushing against it has a little bit of leverage. And then you can see behind the tires, there is a space of dirt or soil, which is adding thermal mass to the tires. So when the sun is low in the sky and it comes in the winter, it heats up the tires, it heats up the space behind it. And then there's insulation to keep the heat that the tires have gained within the tires and to keep the cool ground temperature out of the house. And the plastic barrier is just for moisture containment. These are a couple pictures of upcycling at its best. On the left, you can see basically a beautiful stained window that has been created by using bottles as forms basically for concrete. And then on the right is one of the more elaborate buildings that they've been testing with huge windows. It's a 2-story with all of the can spires, and they use this housing for students that go to Taos to take the Earthship lessons or the academy classes. The third principle is energy. And one of the greatest ways that Earthships are able to provide all of the electricity that you need reasonably priced is by reducing the need for power. So through the passive solar gain and through the passive cooling, you don't need a heater or an air conditioning system, greatly reducing the amount of energy that you need. You also want to provide energy efficient appliances and use DC power as much as possible. And DC is basically the power that you get from solar panels or windmills. When they're stored in a battery, that is DC power, and it takes power to convert it to AC like your normal plug in a home. So the more you can use power in its original form, the less power you have to use. And then the main principle is to use solar or wind to generate all of your electrical needs. The picture on the right is actually called a dynasphere, and it's a vertical access wind turbine that was designed by the architect Michael Reynolds, and they're beautiful. There's one at the visitor center. This is the one at the visitor center. I'm not really sure how effective they are, but they're a beautiful piece of artwork. And then the fourth principle is clean water. And so you catch all of your water from your roof. So the roof either has to be concrete or metal so that you don't contaminate the water. You wouldn't want to use asphalt shingles that would contaminate the water. And then once the water is collected in the cistern, before it's used, it goes through this water organizing module, which looks a little crazy, but really all it is the water comes in and it's filtered through progressively more and more smaller, fine filters before it's used. And then there's these two on the far right, those are for drinking water only. So the water that you use in your shower and your sinks is not filtered as fine as your drinking water. And then this diagram shows you a little bit better how from the top it rains onto your roof, it goes down into your cistern, and then flows in, would go through that organizing module, so it's filtered, then goes through to your sinks or up to your shower. And then once it leaves your sinks and shower, that is considered gray water. And that would flow into your greenhouse and it would water all of your plants from underneath. In Nebraska, gray water is not regulated until it leaves the house. So they have no problem with your planter inside the greenhouse. The greenhouse water flows from one end to the other. And once it gets to the bottom, you can recirculate it to the top, or you can repipe it. It's kind of hard to see on this diagram, but there is a shadow of a pipe that goes to the toilet. Many Earthships use the water at the end of the planter to then flush the toilet, and then can go outside and water landscape outside from underneath as well. I had my system set up to do this. However, I never turned that switch over because as one person living in an Earthship, I found I did not have enough water to water all of my plants and flush my toilets. It was one person, I just didn't have enough gray water to do that. So I always used water directly from the cistern for my toilets. The next principle is a traditional sewage treatment. In a greenhouse, or I'm sorry, in an Earthship, normally you would have a septic tank that the black water runs into. And then when the black water, when it breaks down and the water is ready to flow out, that would go into an outside botanical cell, just like the one inside the greenhouse. However, in Nebraska, that is not legal. And I was required, this is a picture of my septic tank that was installed. I was required to do a traditional sewage treatment center with the septic tank, and then the overflow went into a traditional sewer lagoon. If my soil would have been more porous, I could have had a leaching field, but I have clay soil on my property, and so that was not allowed. And the sixth principle is food, which is probably my favorite principle. A lot of people who have Earthships don't grow any food. They really just grow plants in their planter. I think it's almost illegal to have an Earthship and not have a banana tree. The picture on the right is that was my actual greenhouse and my banana tree. This, I believe, oh no, this was the first year that I planted the banana tree, when the variety I bought was supposed to be 12 to 15 feet tall at maturity. I think I was sent the wrong variety because I had 13-foot ceilings and they were going up and out of the roof. So when I needed to close the ceiling at the end of the season, I cut my banana trees off at 4 foot. I wasn't really sure if that was going to kill them or what was going to happen, but I had to do something so that I could close the roof. But after that, I did find out that you can cut banana trees off at the ground and they will just continue to grow up. And you can see in this picture, you can see my bananas that are hanging here. This was right after it had blossomed, and the bananas hadn't plumped up yet, but they were hanging and preparing to ripen. And the picture on the right, you can see bucket gardens are pretty common in Earthships to try to help utilize some of the vertical space and to try to get a few more plants in. These are a couple pictures from my own greenhouse. This was some of my dinosaur kale, and then this is a better picture of my bananas. I think there was nothing better all winter long to go out into my own greenhouse every day and to pick kale and bok choy and tomatoes and peppers. It was amazing to have that opportunity. Now we're going to kind of go into some pros of Earthship living. I think the number one pro is probably that you're off grid, especially here in a state like Nebraska, where we have storms like we just had. If the power goes out, you don't really care, because I had my own power. I was always being off grid. You're always on with your electricity. There are no utility bills. The only utility bill that I did have was propane. I had a small propane tank that cost $91 the last time I filled it up, and that lasted 2 years. I used that for my cooking and for my hot water heater, which was an on-demand hot water heater, which I loved my on-demand hot water heater. The next pro I would say is that you're self-sufficient. I think many people who build Earthships really desire to be not only off-grid, but self-sufficient, and they really embrace the homesteading attitudes of taking care of your own self and growing your own food. And then lastly would be that Earthships are unique, and you can make them as unique as you want. Berm homes in of themselves are very unique, but if you Google Earthships, it's amazing some of the designs that you will find. They can be very unique looking. Mine was relatively normal looking, like a regular berm home, but they can be as wild as you want to have them. Some of the cons of building an Earthship is that they are very labor intensive. I had, when I was going to build mine, my first idea was that when I went to Argentina, I was going to learn how to build them. I was going to come back and build my own. And very shortly, I realized that pounding the tires would have taken me probably 2 years. So what I did was created a Facebook page and advertised on it that I was looking for volunteers. And I had about 60 volunteers. Some of them stayed for a weekend. Some of them stayed for a month and a half. So all of the help was greatly appreciated. I did hire one person from Earthship community who had been an employee of theirs and was traveling. And he had been teaching in their academy and had been part of quite a few builds. So I just wanted somebody there who knew exactly what they were doing so that I got the foundation of my home correct. So the build is very labor intensive. And if you're trying to do it by yourself, it would take a very long time. Another problem is humidity. In areas that have a problem with humidity, there is a need for some kind of dehumidifier. And I did find that in the spring and summer, I needed to run dehumidifiers to keep my house humidity under control. That would have been something I would have changed. I would have set up some kind of drainage pipe so that I could have just set up a dehumidifier and not had to worry about ever emptying it. So that is something to think about. The other thing is that you need to manage the ship. The reason they're called Earthships are because they're like a sailboat, a sailing ship. You have to take the sails down when the wind isn't blowing or when it's blowing too hard, and then you have to put them back up when you're ready to go whatever direction. So to regulate the temperature in an Earthship, you do need to open and close the cooling tubes or open and close the skylights in the greenhouse. for me, this really wasn't an issue. It was really minimal. I left the windows open, the skylights open from spring through fall, never closed them. I did open and close a few windows, and I left the cooling tubes basically open the whole summer as well. If you are the kind of person who wants your home, if you want to set your thermostat to 72 or to 70, whatever, and you want it to be that temperature all the time, this is probably not the home for you. Some mornings, my home, when I got up in the winter, would be relatively cool. And I had a pellet stove that I used for supplemental heat that sometimes I would light. If it was going to be a beautiful sunny day, I didn't light it. I would throw on a jacket for the first hour, hour and a half, because as soon as the sun is up and shining, the house warms up almost to the point where you need to open some windows. So you need to be able to live with a range, a comfort range of temperatures. The fourth con, I would say, is permitting. The general rule for building an Earthship is the more rural the area, the more likely it is to be able to get a permit. When I got, well, even before I bought my property, I had called 2 different counties that I was interested in staying within. Both of them were open to the concept. So I was looking for property that I could build on. And then once I had my property, I printed out like what a tire wall is, how it's built. I took my books with me and I went to the permitting office because I thought it would be harder for them to say no to me in person. But they had absolutely no problem with it. So I was given my permit with no problem at all. And I think most rural counties, I think you can pretty much guarantee that you can get it. It is important to know they may have some alterations that they make you make. For instance, I couldn't do the traditional Earthship sewage treatment, but everything else I was able to do. And then the last drawback, I would say, is the upfront cost, particularly of the solar system. If you're buying a solar system and you're having it installed, that can be a very pricey upfront cost. The rest of the home, I would say, is probably comparable to a regular home, but I think the cost of the solar can really push you over. However, they're not hard to install. If you do your research and you buy, particularly if you buy a kit, everything is there, everything is sized. People who sell you the components are very, very good at talking to you and walking you through everything. So I installed my whole system myself. So it really can be done. And also I would say one of the things about the upfront cost, some of the recycled materials can cost, quite a bit to get. Like my recycled insulation was pretty costly, but I put an absorbent amount of insulation. I had 9 inches of polyiso insulation in my ceiling. So there was no heat loss through my roof. So that was a higher cost up front, but by insulating, it's also a lower cost on the back end. So it's always a give and take there. All right. And then my final thoughts. I think the original books that Mike wrote about Earthships were awesome, and I enjoyed reading every one of them. However, you need to keep in mind that they've never been updated. So they are based on the original designs of Earthships. And as Earthships have progressed in their design, as they've made more and more of them and figured out what works, what doesn't work, what works better, those options are not included. One thing I would say is in the original Earthships, the water cisterns, they made them and they were inside the home, thinking that the temperature of the water would help mediate the temperature of the inside, which it does to a certain extent. However, if it's cold and it's raining and you have 40-degree water coming in, it also takes that, you have to bring that water up to a good temperature before it regulates the temperature within the home. So after they've figured that out, they started putting sisters on the outside. you can get a complete set of blueprints basically for free by purchasing the Earthship app for your phone or iPad. I believe when I bought it, the app was $10. I don't know if it still is or not, but it's very, very reasonable. And there are several models that the full set of drawings are on there. And even if you don't use them, my home, I changed the layout of the home on the inside, but the walls were all built according to those plans. So I use them as the basis of my design. But there were alterations made from them. So even if you don't use the plans word for word the way they're drawn, still they're a very, very good resource to refer back to understand the concepts. The other thing I would say is if you're interested in building your own, I would definitely recommend that you attend academy classes. They've even, since the pandemic, they offer academy classes online. And so you can do those in the luxury of your own home. And I believe those are even done, they're all pre-recorded, and so that you can do them at your own pace. I think sometimes they also do them live, but you also have that pre-recorded option, I believe. If Earthships are something that you're really interested in and maybe want to look into as a career, I would definitely get certified. There is a 3-step certification that they offer, which is basically attending the academy classes, and you have to participate in at least one Earthship sanctioned build. So an Earthship that they are building themselves, so that they know you are being exposed to concepts that as they teach them. And then the third part of it is to do some kind of independent study. And there are all different kinds. You get to pick your own independent study. You submit your idea, and they say yes or no. They may tweak it. They may ask you to do something a little bit different. But those 3 items are what you need to do to be certified. And then lastly, if you're at all interested in building your own, I would definitely participate in an Earthship sanctioned build. There is nothing like going to a build like the one I went to in Argentina, where 70 people who are all interested in Earthships and all love the design are all together, and you can talk about Earthships. When I first found out about them, and I would say, oh my gosh, I saw this house and I want to build this house. The walls are made out of tires and cans and bottles. And I was this crazy lady who wanted to build a trash house that nobody had ever heard of the concept. At least now, I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people have heard of Earthships now. But it's still so exciting to go to a place where there are 70 other people who know exactly what you're talking about, and to get their ideas, because all of us had our own ideas on what we wanted to do, and you can pick each other's minds and take ideas from other people. So that was one of the most exciting times of my life. Also, the 70 people that were volunteering were from all over the world. I mean, there were quite a few people from the US and from South America, but there were people from Siberia, from Africa, from Australia and New Zealand. So I'm lucky enough now to have people that I follow on Facebook, and we keep in touch, and I'm able to see what they're doing. Rob, the Earthship employee that came and helped me with my home, is actually, he's built his own Earthship in the Czech Republic right now. So it's exciting to see all of my coworkers there building their own Earthships, and seeing the kinds that they build, because all of us are designing our own basically. So it's exciting to see what we've taken from our classes and what we've decided to build ourselves. So, and lastly, that pretty much ends my discussion of Earthships, which I could literally go on for hours. But if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer your questions.
Thank you so much for that, Kathy. I really,
So,
really enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did. Real quick before we do Q&As, we do have a few already that people have already
okay,
asked. I will send out a quick poll really quick. This is how we maintain funding for our Common Ground program. So if you guys could take just a few moments to answer these questions, and we will get right into the Q&As as well.
okay.
So the first question is from Jessie, and she's wondering, are there Earthships in Nebraska that are open to tours?
When I had mine, I did give quite a few tours. I had talked to Mike Reynolds, the architect, and he told me mine was the only one in Nebraska. There is one off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of it. But there is a house in Western Nebraska who is Earthship inspired. So they have a tire wall in the back and they do have windows on the front. One thing Mike is pretty strict about is if it's an Earthship, it's plans that he's designed. If you design your own and you don't use his plans, you need to call it an Earthship inspired home, because just because you have a tire wall on the back and you have windows on the front, that's not an Earthship. That doesn't provide the 6 principles of an Earthship.
And then the next question was, where in Nebraska was Kathy's Earthship?
Mine was about 25 miles south of Lincoln. And so I still have the tire wall, that's still there. And I'm trying to decide if I'm going to rebuild it or not. It's a lot of work. I don't know if I can do all of that all over again. So we'll see. Time will tell.
And that kind of goes into our next question. Someone asked, what happened to your home?
I had a surge strip that shorted out just 2 years ago. I wasn't home. I left. I stayed at my daughter's house for the night, and I had a power strip that shorted out and started a fire. And since I wasn't there, it burnt to the ground.
And then, is there any info on what the average cost to build an Earthship in the United States / Midwest is?
There isn't, because it really depends on what you build, how big it is, the materials that you use, what you're able to recycle, and the costs of those, and how big they are. I mean, they can be, mine was a little over 1,000 square feet of living area, not including the greenhouse. And all in, it cost me about $50,000. But you can, I mean, there are some beautiful, huge greenhouses that are like 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 3,000 square feet that, I mean, you can spend $1 million on. So it really depends on your finishes and what you're willing to do.
And then someone asked, how did you source your tires?
Oh, that was fun. I actually called a tire center here in Lincoln who has multiple locations and asked them if I could get tires from them. And I told them how many I needed. And they asked me if I wanted to pick them all up at once or if I wanted to do several loads. And I actually said, well, you're getting paid. I think they get $3 per tire to dispose of them. And they're not going to have to dispose of them. So I thought they could just deliver them. And so they sent 2 trucks and 4 men to my house or to my property. And they helped unload them. They helped sort, because you sort them, you put the biggest tires on the bottom, and then you can do smaller tires towards the top. So they were great. They brought them down. They helped unload them. They helped sort them. It was amazing.
And then I have a follow-up question on that. Did you end up having to pay for them, or did they just give them to you?
No, they were very happy to get rid of them. Actually, the fall before I was getting tires, the only recycling center close to us had burnt to the ground. And so they were basically stockpiling tires and had no place to send them to recycle. So they were more than happy to get rid of 700 tires.
Cool.
I will say, I didn't mention this in my talk. I don't know why I didn't. In Nebraska, there is a law that says that you cannot have more than 100 tires on your property for more than a year. I was anonymously turned into the Department of Environmental Quality because I had more than 100 tires, and they came out to investigate, and they were very nice. They gave me a letter of exception because the law is designed so that you're not creating a just a dump on your property. And so they were very nice about it, and they gave me an exception. So I didn't have to, I don't know what I would have done, because they were all pounded and in the walls and had concrete on them at the time. So, and I did start the process and there's also a statute about what you can do to recycle a tire in Nebraska and what you cannot do. And of course, building isn't on either list. And I did start the process a few years ago to add building to the list. And the Department of Environmental Quality wrote a letter of neutrality towards that. They didn't care if it was added to the list, and they didn't care if it wasn't. So it was a neutral letter, which my state representative told me was huge. However, I didn't understand exactly how the state process works. It's in a 2-year cycle. And when I started it, it was January. The end of the 2-year cycle was in April. So there wasn't enough time to get it on the docket and get it voted and everything. So it kind of died in committee. So I would like to restart that process at the beginning of a 2-year cycle sometime.
Okay, and then we have another question that is there any climate that Earthships don't work in, or environments that they are best for?
There are, the design that I built was for cold weather. Mike has also designed ones for warmer climates, which and those provide a lot more airflow so that the hot air goes up and through. He's designed some for hurricane-ridden areas so that the wind basically kind of goes up and over the home and it doesn't destroy it. So they are built everywhere. And there is even an Earthship island in Indonesia. So there are Earthships everywhere. Basically, the design of them changes depending on the climate.
Is it hard to get insurance for an home? I totally admire your courage and dedication.
Oh, thank you. My insurance, I didn't mention it was an Earthship. I just said it was a bermed home. So, which it was. I just didn't tell them that the back wall was tires, and they didn't ask. So their one question was what kind of siding I used. And I literally had maybe 8-foot square area of metal siding, and everything else was glass. So they were a little surprised by that, but that was the only glitch. I had more problems getting it insured because I built it myself. That was what they were questioning, whether or not I was qualified to build one. So I had to tell them, like, I've rehabbed several houses, and I had taken the academy classes, and so to get them comfortable with the fact that I had built my own home.
Is there a way to keep in contact with you, Cathy?
Yeah, on Facebook, my Earthship is Earthship Nebraska, and you can send me messages through that.
And then another question that's kind of similar. Somebody asked if it was I think she's asking about if your Earthship was in Alliance. She said there is a gentleman there who has built geothermal greenhouses, and someone asked if we could contact you through email.
Yeah, you can send me direct messages through the Facebook page, and I'll get those. The greenhouse that they're talking about by Scottsbluff it's just north of the car hinge, and it's called Greenhouse in the Snow. His name is Russ Finch. And no, it's not an Earthship. It's just a geothermal greenhouse. I've toured that though. It's an amazing greenhouse. And sadly, I'm going to say maybe a month ago, his greenhouse collapsed in the snow. On their website, they were talking about it. I can't remember. They were estimating how many pounds of snow were on top of it. And his is, I think it's 40 years old, the original one that he had attached to his house. And some of his original welding had given away in the weight. So that's not an Earthship greenhouse, but it's considered kind of a Wallapini style. So it's underground, which I'm very interested in doing as well. So.
Do you have any suggestions on people to talk with in regarding to building an Earthship inspired home?
If you want to build it yourself, I would definitely recommend that you take the academy classes. If you want to hire somebody to do it, there are quite a few companies that do that. Like Mike Reynolds' son has a company who builds Earthships. Most of them are in New Mexico or Southern Colorado. There's quite a large community in Southern Colorado as well. But yeah, if you want to build yourself, I would definitely take the academy classes. I learned so much from them.
And then, is it possible to do these within city limits, Douglas County? I know you mentioned it being in rural areas.
Yeah, I would say probably not. Before I built my Earthship, I had purchased a house here in Lincoln that I rehabbed. And when inspectors were at that house doing inspections along the way, I was talking to them about this, and they were telling me all the hoops that I would have to go through if I wanted not even to be in Lincoln, but to be in Lancaster County. Would have first off, it would have been so much more expensive it would have been thousands of dollars for the building permit. Whereas in one county to the south, it cost me $380 for the building permit with no hassle, no hoops to jump through. Whereas in Lancaster County, they would have required an engineer to evaluate everything, even though there is an engineer study that you can purchase through the Earthship community. I don't know if a local engineer would accept that, since it's not exactly the same design. So yeah, I would say Sarpy County is probably a no.
Okay, and then someone said, are you interested in selling your Earthship or holding space for a rebuild / teaching project?
Yeah, I waffle back and forth constantly. I loved my home. It was my dream home that I plan to live in forever. It's just so much work, and I'm debating about whether or not to build it. And I go months and months that I'm like, yes, I'm rebuilding. And then I start looking at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much work. I don't know if I can do that. So I still have my land, and yeah, I'm not going to get rid of my land. I definitely will do something there.
And then someone asked, are Earthships pet friendly?
Oh yeah, I have a little Yorkie who lives in my, she's laying over on the sofa. I'm surprised she hasn't barked yet. But yeah, very friendly for animals. The only thing I would say that maybe is not pet friendly is the greenhouse. People who have cats tend to have a problem with the cats wanting to dig and use it as a litter box. So then a lot of people put chicken wire on top of the planting, and then cut holes in the chicken wire to plant your plants in, just to keep the cats out of there. But other than that, I don't see any reason you couldn't have any kind of pet in it.
How does having the tires in the ground affect the environment or water around the house?
It doesn't affect the environment at all. They actually did a study, the Earthship organization, to show that the tires do not leach into the groundwater, or they don't leach chemicals into the home itself. It's all plastered over. Also in Sarpy County, the gentleman who installed my cistern, or not cistern, the septic system, the septic tank, was telling me that in Sarpy County, when they install laterals into a sewage treatment on an acreage, they are required in Sarpy County to put 3 feet of ground tires as bedding in there for the drainage tubes. So, the whole theory that they're going to leach into the soil, I think, is an old science, and it's been disproven.
And then where can I find the online academy classes?
Those are at the Earthship Biotexture website. If you just Google Earthships and go to their website. And that's where you also buy the app as well, by the way. And the app, by the way, is very nice because once you buy the app, when you open it, anytime you open it I purchased mine probably 10 years ago. And now when I periodically open it, if there are any updates, it updates your app. So it's not like you get the plans that are current when you purchase it. You get any updates as it goes along.
What is the temp range in the house?
First off, I'd say the geothermal, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The thermal mass can take up to a year to build its temperature. So the fluctuations the first year are greater than after that, because that helps regulate the temperature. My greenhouse, I never saw it go below 48 degrees. So, and that buffered the whole front of the house. I would say if I didn't use any heat, the lowest temperature would probably have been maybe 55, 58, somewhere in that range. But also I was only in my house for 2 years finished before I had my fire. So, and my design was a little bit different too. I had an open end. Normally Earthships are completely, both ends are dug into the bank, all 3 sides basically, and only the front where the greenhouse is open. I had 2 sides open because my property has a 60-acre lake on it, and I wanted to be able to see the lake. So my house was designed after one that I saw in New Zealand, which has a little bit more temperate climate, but that was a design I wanted. So I gave up some of the warmth in exchange for the view.
And then what was the highest temperature that you think it got?
Well, and I travel for work. And so sometimes when I came home on Friday and the house had really been closed up, it could probably be, probably in the mid 80s. But then you just have to open the cooling vents up and get things going, and it'll cool down.
Okay. Thank you. And then how do Earthships hold up to or built for earthquakes?
They're supposed to be very earthquake resistant. The walls might crack, but each tire is filled with dirt and then compacted with a sledgehammer. What I like to do is fill 4 of them with dirt and then kind of kick the dirt into them, fill them again, kick the dirt into them, fill them again, and then sledgehammer them. And so each tire is swollen, and then they're fitted together. And then there's also rebar that are pounded down from the top, and then they're plastered in. So they're very secure. I would say the plastering might crack and you might have to repair that, but I don't think that wall's going anywhere.
If you wanted to get plans to build one, where would you go? Is there a web page or Facebook page to reach the Earthship building experts?
Yeah, from just Google Earthship, and their Earthship organization has their own web page. You can buy the app and get those plans, or you can buy complete sets directly from Earthship, and those, they used to be thousands of dollars. And I noticed in December, I believe they had really slashed the prices, and they had taken them down to, I think the cheapest was like maybe $800 to $3,000 range. So, and then if you want to make changes, that always costs more too, because if you want Mike to go in and adjust them and create new plans for you.
This isn't a question. Someone just said, many thanks to you, Cathy, for sharing your time and knowledge. I am so disappointed that we didn't get to go down to tour your home. I've added a trip to Taos in my bucket list.
Oh, Taos is amazing. And there's also, if you're going to Taos, there's hot springs all around too. So you can Google those. There's some commercial ones that you can go to, but then there's also some that are just down in the gorge. A friend and I went and we walked around for 2 hours trying to find the hot springs. But when we finally found them, we found, we had went by them and we had walked for a really long time. So Taos is an amazing place to go visit.
And then someone asked, how do you think the community reception was after building your Earthship?
I think the community reception was pretty good. The Omaha World Herald came down and did an article about my Earthship, and they went and talked to neighbors, which I didn't know they were going to do. Most of the neighbors were very positive. One neighbor, which remained unnamed, was worried that I was going to hurt their property values. But, it really only hurts your property values if I sold it and it didn't sell for very much, because on the lake where my property is, the houses are ridiculously expensive. So, and I'm not selling, and so it doesn't hurt their values at all.
And then was there any issue with groundwater levels? Was there ever flooding issues?
No, but I did add, behind the tires at the bottom, I added drain tile in and gravel. And so that if there was any additional water behind the house, that would run away, because I know, and my main purpose for doing that was I was worried about getting water before the roof and the gutter system was on, getting a bunch of water back there. So, but once the house was built, actually the only time I ever got water into the house was right after I got the roof on, and I hurried and got the gutter on because we were supposed to get a huge rain, and I hooked it up to the cistern, and we had 3 inches, and my cistern was completely filled and overflowing. And so a lot of water was going down the backside of the tires. But the only place it came in was the opening where the pipe comes from the cistern came into the house. That was the only place it was coming in. But, and because I had hooked up the gutter so quickly, I didn't have the overflow pipe installed yet. So, but that was the only time.
Cool. Thank you. And then give me just 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's enough interest, is there a way to make the rebuild of your home into a teaching center for people locally that want to learn to build or get certified in the process?
If I rebuild, I will definitely be putting up on my website or on my Facebook page that I'm rebuilding. And if anybody wants to come down, they are more than welcome to come. There won't, well, let's see, there would be the front wall of the greenhouse is 4 rows of tires. Those would be the only tires that really need to be pounded, because those were removed after the fire, just cleaning up the debris. So those would be the only tires that would need to be repounded. The rest of it's really just framing, putting the roof on, and rebuilding. So, but yeah, when and if I rebuild, I will definitely be posting on my Facebook page, and anybody who wants to come, more than welcome.
And then another, not a question, but just a thank you. This has been really interesting, great presentation, and makes me wish I wasn't such a city person.
Yeah, I really vacillate between, I like living in town, but I really love being out where, you can watch the stars and see the geese, and my dog would love when the geese were all on the property, and I would let her out and she would chase them all off, and she would feel like she was a big dog. So I really love the acreage and the privacy out there.
Okay, and then another thank you, very interesting program.
Thank you.
And then that looks like all the questions and comments that we have. If anybody has any time for any last minute ones, I just want to thank you so much for all being here today. And thank you, Cathy, for your time and your knowledge and expertise. This was such a fun program, and I think people will definitely remember this.
Thank you. And also I would add, if anybody is interested in building or talking more about Earthships, if you send me a message through my Facebook page, I'm always interested in talking Earthships, and I can give you some pointers if you're looking to get permitted or something like that.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So with that, we will end today. Again, thank you so much for all being here.
Thank you, Moira.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.